David, thanks very much. It's a reflection of the kind of gritty northern quality of this evening that I walked straight in, no drink, no eat, straight into work, unforgiving, relentless. Yeah, thanks very much. So I am now standing between myself and my own drink. I'll tell you, that is an incentive for me to get on and shut up. Can I first thank the sponsors?
Red or white?
Sorry?
Red or white?
White. Yorkshire Water, Northumbrian Water Limited, and what is ANEC? Yes, ANEC. It's very good of you indeed to sponsor an evening of, yes, some sadness. I mean, I think it's worth starting where David left off. I am really genuinely still heartbroken that there were all these seats, thanks so much, all these seats across the north of England, including seats, my dear friend and colleague Paul Scriven in Sheffield Central, and in York, and in Newcastle, and in Hull, and in many, many other parts of the north of England where, I can't remember the exact figures, someone from the campaigns department will be able to remind me. I think there were about a dozen seats that we lost with only 1,000 votes between them. It was incredibly, incredibly tight. And no one will forget the kind of ruthless scaremongering that was thrown at us in those last 4 or 5 days. And you know, we've all compared notes on this. Those last few days, the most extraordinarily false things were said about us in leaflet after leaflet after leaflet. And basically, one of the oldest emotions and one of the oldest tricks in a book was thrown at us in unforgiving quantities in those last few days. It was fear, it was scaremongering, and it was deployed to devastating effect. But that doesn't mean that we're going away. Labour, I know, is going around and saying that somehow we have betrayed the North. I don't know about you, I thought it was their betrayal. It was their betrayal. It was their betrayal of the North. That means that children who, are born on the wrong side of the tracks in one part of our communities still die a decade and a half before children who were born on the right side of the tracks, and that gap wasn't narrowed in 13 years of Labour. It was a betrayal by Labour that meant that the inequalities of North and South were not narrowed over the last decade and a half. It was a betrayal of Labour. They kowtowed to the bankers in the City of London and led our economy to the edge of ruin. And above all, it was their betrayal to have left the coffers completely empty. It was their betrayal to have spent communities dry. And as I said in my speech earlier, you know more than anybody else what real betrayal is when Labour lets local communities down by running services right to the bone and leaving no money at all for the future generations of our great cities and communities of the North. And we are going to put that right, as we have done in councils here, in Newcastle, in Sheffield, everywhere where we have had to pick up the pieces of the destruction left by Labour. We're going to do that again now in national government. It isn't going to be easy. It doesn't make you necessarily popular. It wasn't easy for me, and it's still not easy for me, to defend the fact that we couldn't honour a promise made by Labour to forge masters in Sheffield, which they knew they didn't have the money to fulfil. 11 working days before the general election was called, they signed a cheque they knew would bounce. Why? So that Gordon Brown could have a photo opportunity in Sheffield 2 days before the general election. They knew the money was not there. They knew it was not affordable. And if there's one thing that I know people in Sheffield and across the north of England want more than anything else, is that we level with them. We don't pretend things are the way that they are when they're not. We're not going to pretend there's money there when it's not. We're not going to make promises when it's not affordable. We're not going to write out cheques when they're going to bounce. But what we are going to do is do things differently. And that's where the exciting opportunity lies. And that's why the announcement I made today, to say to you, running our great councils across the north of England, we're not going to constantly ask you to come on bended knee to officials and ministers in Whitehall. That was the Labour way of doing things. We're not going to control everything you do. We're going to lift ring fencing. We're going to lift caps on council tax, and we're going to allow you to borrow money against future revenue so that you can do what you think is best for your community. And that is a liberal vision for the north of England, not constantly going with a begging bowl to arrogant Labour ministers in Whitehall, but creating new businesses, new opportunities, new jobs, new futures and new hope for our children in the way that you know best in your communities, in communities that you know best. Trusting people. No longer the kind of relationship of distrust that used to exist from Labour ministers towards local communities in the north. Trusting you. Trusting people to take the best decisions for themselves. I can't think of a better definition of liberalism, and I can't think of a better future for the north either. So thank you very much, good luck, and good to see you.